Hello and welcome to the KPI Institute's webinar, Benchmarking Methodologies, Which One is the Best? My name is Andrei Kostia and I will be your host for today along with our presenter Alina Mirtoiu. This webinar is part of a series of free educational materials that aim to enhance the knowledge and know-how of those interested, while also creating a bridge between us as a company and you, our public. The KPI Institute is a research organization specialized in business performance. It operates research programs in 12 practice domains, each linked to a certification course, ranging from strategy and KPIs to employee performance, and from customer service to innovation performance. The KPI Institute continuously builds on its values of best know-how, data and facts, and common sense to achieve its mission of integrating performance as a discipline through research, publications, and, what interests us today, through educational programs such as this webinar. Today, 13 years after the KPI Institute was created, we can proudly say that our products have reached professionals in 5 continents and that our public comprises a worldwide community of 73,000 members online and 28,000 registered companies on smartkpis.com. Today's webinar will teach you all about the existing benchmarking methodologies and practical examples of efficiently deploying them, and it will be delivered by Alina Mirtoiu, the Director of the Center for Performance Benchmarking. She is also a certified benchmarking professional and a KPI professional, and her research activity in the performance management field has resulted in the documentation of over 500 key performance indicators examples. As a research analyst, one of Alina's most significant research programs focused on developing a benchmarking study in the utilities sector for 3 major utilities: water, gas, and electricity generation, which comprises worldwide data. This presentation lasts for approximately 30 minutes. Please feel free to ask any questions you might have during the webinar, as they will be answered at the end of the presentation in our Q&A session. Enjoy the KPI Institute's webinar, Benchmarking Methodologies. Which one is the best? Now, I would like to invite Alina to begin her presentation.
Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. Also, thank you, Andre, for your presentation. Since this is the 5th webinar of the series on benchmarking, I would like to start by reviewing the last 4. So we had the first 3 webinars, which were focused on particularities of performance management of each of the 3 utilities included in the report series, water, gas, and electricity. And the 4th tackled a more general theme, which was the secondary benchmarking and its importance. During this webinar, we will talk about benchmarking methodologies, and this is because establishing a methodology is basically key for all research projects. And we at the KPI Institute also face the same question every time we develop a research project. Which is the best one and the less risky, if you may, methodology when deploying, research studies and benchmarking studies, which interest us today. So back in 2016, when the KPI Institute, through its Center for Performance Benchmarking and Utilities Lab, initiated the large-scale secondary benchmarking initiative, the Utilities Performance Benchmarking Report Series, we started with the same question, which methodology to choose and which are the steps we need to follow. So I think that each professional basically asks himself the same question. Our large-scale project contains 6 reports revealing most common KPIs monitored by utilities companies worldwide and presents their performance results. We focused, as I said, on water, gas, and electricity, and for each one of them, we had 2 reports released, one financial and one non-financial. Now, you can imagine that for this type of initiative, a lot of data was gathered, processed, and analyzed. So we had to make sure that the process was very well established in order to avoid having to redo certain steps or having to, analyzing the data and then realize that some steps were overlooked and so on. So based on this experience we acquired, today we will talk about the most well-known methodologies, benchmarking stages, and you will see that they are actually related, but also about key factors that influence the way an organization or a benchmarking team chooses their methodology. During this webinar, several benchmarking advantages and methodologies will be presented, explained, and practical recommendations will be given in order on how to better choose your methodology. And also keep in mind that I would also want to know your opinion. So please do answer the questions I have prepared for today. The purpose of this webinar is to help us identify between different benchmarking methodologies which one is best suited for our needs, and explore possible scenarios in order for have some in practice recommendation, and also enable practitioners to generate added value from a benchmarking initiative and make the results of the initiative or make sure that the initiative brings results for the organization. So let's start with understanding what is benchmarking, or better, why is benchmarking such an important tool, and why would any organization want to invest in benchmarking? So if we take a look of these definitions listed on the screen, we can see that most of them see benchmarking as a continuous and systematic process implemented to lead to superior performance of an organization. So now some of them make only talk about industry, and it says analyzing your and adapting to your industry's best practices. So basically comparing yourselves only to your direct competitors, while some of them talk about performance improvement coming from even outside your your industry. So what are the benefits of such a systematic process? It gives your company the opportunity to compare its performance against competitors. Now here it's listed industry competitors, but as I said, your benchmarking partners can also be outside your industry. It highlights best and lowest performance levels of the benchmarking partners you have chosen. It can show which is the baseline from where to start measuring improvements or setting targets for your own organization. It gives the opportunity to learn from the best practices or from the leader's experience, from the one you identify as being a best practice or a leader in that field or industry. It also well, it determines strengths and weaknesses, or it helps you determine the strengths and weaknesses of your own organization. And it fosters innovation, but especially if the benchmarking study is done outside your industry. And through all these six, basically what it does is to lead to performance improvement. So benchmarking is a tool used to drive performance improvement. Now I would like to take a few seconds, and I would like to know what other benefits, or if you could tell me any other benefit of benchmarking that comes to your mind, maybe from your own experience or from just other benefits that just come to your mind when you think about benchmarking. So I would like to take about 10, 15, 20 seconds, and please write in the comment section what do you think are actually some other benefits that I have not listed. Now think about maybe some projects you have deployed, or some case studies you have read. Maybe how does your organization do benchmarking, and Okay, so we have one question that one answer. Let's see, that it brings insights in wasteful activities. That is true. It can underline whether you have to think about changing the strategy for one activity or another, or if it's wasteful or not. Check alignment across functions and products. That is another answer. And helps focus the teams and functions. So helps brings focus to the organization. Now we have another answer that it says that you are able to know your strengths and the way you position yourself in the market. Let's see if somebody else has another answer. Okay, so thank you very much for all these answers. They were really good, and they offer a very good perspective. Now I would like us to briefly remember from the previous webinar which are the main steps of deploying a benchmarking study, be it well, primary or secondary. So there are 4 main stages, and obviously, as it is the case of any project, we need to start with the preparation phase, in which okay, so the preparation phase is basically the one in which the needs are established based on an internal analysis. The problems are defined, your benchmarking team is selected, and usually the benchmarking partners are also selected in this step. But this can depend whether if it's a secondary or a primary study. And we will discuss this a bit later. So once all these are established, the second phase begins, which is data gathering. And now that the benchmarking team now the benchmarking team has to set the indicators or the processes that they need to benchmark based on the problem or the needs which were established in the first phase. Now they also have to establish the method and collect and prepare the data for analysis. So you choose the methodology in the first phase, but now you have to apply it. Mostly, this is the step of going to action once you establish the indicators. And the next step, the third, is the analysis phase. And in this phase, the data, which is already prepared in the previous step, is analyzed using statistics in order to highlight performance gaps or best practices. So better said, this is the step when shows where the company stands against its benchmarking partners and what it needs to be improved. So based on this analysis, the improvement initiatives are formulated, implemented, and the progress is monitored constantly, which is the fourth phase, the improvement and implementation. Now you are based on the analysis, you get to decide what to improve and implement. From the poll we had last week, I remember that most participants admitted that data collection seemed to be the most challenging part, especially when we talked about the secondary benchmarking. And this is because data gathering influences the complexity and the duration of other two stages, which is preparation and analysis. Just imagine if you have a scattered data gathering process done, let's say, by several people in a different way by each one of them, and they each gather the data from a wide range of organizations, which may report or may not report what you need, which maybe they report it in different ways, have different names. So you have a very big database which needs to be prepared and analyzed, but it's all unstandardized. So the work of standardizing and preparing that huge database for the actual analysis, like having all the KPIs that express the same thing with the same name, or having all the data expressed in the same unit of measurement and so on, will take a lot of time. And with it, you will get to the conclusion that the benchmarking the benchmarking process is actually very time consuming, and maybe you think that it's not worth investing in it anymore. So data collection, it is an important step. This is why you need to have the methodology of your project very well thought before. So now we will move to discussing 8 main benchmarking methodologies used in practice. And I would like to discuss them in comparison with these 4 main steps that we've been discussing so far. And we will start with first methodology, which is APQC's 4-phase model. And as we can see here, basically they have plan, collect, analyze, and adapt, which is more or less the same thing we've been discussing. So plan is the preparation phase, collect is the data gathering phase, analyze basically data analysis, and then adapt is improvement and implementation, which means that you adapt what you've been collecting through the data you've analyzed. You will adapt the findings to your own organization in order to implement them. Another methodology is Camp RC's model. He was one of the people who started using benchmarking, and he has the same 4-step model: planning, again preparation, then you have the analysis as a different part. So for him, data gathering is included in this part, not as a separate step. The integration, which means that you are so basically he split improvement and implementation into 2, and he has integration, which is the improvement phase, where you get to integrate the results of your analysis to your own organizational environment, and then you put them into action. So into integration phase, you will let's say create the action plan, and then you will put it into action and monitor it. The next methodology is TRADE's methodology, which is a 5 stages methodology. It starts with the plan, and what it has different is that you have research current state and acquire the best practices as 2 different steps. So firstly, you go ahead and gather the whole data, and you create, like, you get acquainted to the environment, but then you focus only on the best practices. So you don't care about the level of the whole industry or the average of the industry, but you only focus on those best practices that can offer you the most valuable knowledge. Then you get to communicate and implement. And what I like most about this methodology is the fact that it has the evaluation of the benchmarking process as a separate step. And it clearly states that you have to evaluate the outcomes, you have to evaluate the improvement measures that you have put into action in order to make sure they are actually correct. And if not, you get to reanalyze the data or go to the results of the analysis and see where what you've done wrong, and find other improvements measures that actually suit your company. So I consider evaluation and learning from what you've implemented as important as learning from others' experience in the first stages of benchmarking. The next methodology would be Motorola's methodology, which has the first part, the planning part, split it in two, which is decide what to benchmark and choose the benchmarking partners, which we have said this is in the preparation phase. Then data gathering, data analysis, and it goes directly to recalibrate. So once you analyze the data, basically the analysis of the data also contains finding improvement initiatives and putting them into practice. And they go directly to learning from what you did and recalibrate your processes. Another methodology is Kaiser Associates, and this comes with the first part, which is determine activities to benchmark. Basically, they are stating that you need to find the need of your organization. Then identify the performance indicator and selecting the benchmarking partners. This is in a, let's say, in a different order than we've discussed, because in our the four stages, in the preparation phase, you had to select the benchmarking, but you identified the indicators during the data gathering period. And what they have different is as well that they state measure the performance of partners and measure your own performance as different parts, while in no other methodology we've found measuring your own performance, because technically this would be a given when talking about benchmarking. But it's good that they stated, just to make sure that organizations know they also have to have their own results for those performance indicators if they want to compare their performance to other companies. And they have identified actions to close performance gaps, which is the improvement part, and implementation and monitoring. What's different about this other methodology, which is AT&T, is that they have focused their methodology exclusively on best in class. So you start planning, you have a preliminary data collection, then you single out the best in class and you do your data collection, the biggest part, and the assessment only on the best in class. So this is a methodology that is useful when you are trying to single out the best performance in your industry or in the field you're trying to benchmark, in order to benchmark your organization or compare your performance only with the best in class. And one other part they have singled out is the implementation training. So what they're saying is that you have the analysis, you have the improvement initiatives, but you have to train your people in order for them to know how to apply those improvements that you came up with. we've gotten to the IBM methodology, which we have used as a starting point for the study we have conducted, the secondary benchmarking study I was telling you about. And what they are saying is that you need to start with the business understanding and understanding the environment, which was very useful for us as being a third party. Then you have to analyze a bit the sector, to specify the data requirements, and only then get to the data collection part. And they have data understanding as a different step. You have to collect the data, you have to make sure you know what you've collected, and then start the preparation and analysis. And also, before writing the report or coming up with initiatives, what they say is that you have to evaluate the analysis you did. You have to evaluate that, or to, let's say, make sure that the data you have used for the analysis part is the correct one. So have, let's say, an intermediate evaluation of what you did before actually implementing those initiatives. Last methodology, which is, let's say, the most complex one, would be Xerox 10-step methodology. As you see here, they have stages, and also they have steps for each stage in order to make sure it is as complex as possible. And they have the planning part, they have the analysis part, which is it is also the part where you determine the data you want to collect and how you want to collect it, and then collect the data and determine the performance gaps. Then they are talking under integration about establishing functional goals. So you don't just develop your initiatives or develop the action plan, but you have to establish the goals before doing that. And they are also specifying the recalibration of the benchmark, which I said I find it very important as a intermediate evaluation, because it's good to evaluate and know that once you've put something into action, you are continuously monitoring it and make sure it works. If not, go back to the data analysis part and make sure you've used the correct data if it's not working, or make sure your conclusions based on data are the correct ones. Now, after we've seen all these methodologies, I would like to know which one of these you would choose, and why would you choose one of these methodologies? So give me one argument or so. And let's take about 20 seconds or so. Okay, so one of the answers is that people would go with the simplest method to start with benchmarking. Let's see if we get other insights from our participants. So the simplest method, I would think it will be the 4 steps methodologies, the ones that are very easy to deploy. Okay, so we'll go with the answer that will choose the easiest methodology when trying to start with benchmarking. Now let's see some in practice recommendations and the factors that can influence us when choosing the methodology. First of all, benchmarking partners. Well, as we've already seen in the example above, the benchmarking partners influence in a huge part the data gathering process. Maybe let's think about that you're choosing benchmarking as benchmarking partners 3 organizations you think that you can compare yourself with, but you find out meanwhile while trying to gather the data that they do not report the same thing as you do, or they do not report it in the same way. So you have to standardize everything that you get from them. So what would you do then? What would you do? Let's say if you want to compare yourself with the best in class, then of course, and you will single out 3 companies. Then of course, if they do not measure the same thing as you do, it can help you first of all because obviously you will see other ways of measuring performance. But still, you won't get data for the exact KPIs or the process you are implementing. And you won't be able to compare it exactly as maybe you thought in the first place, and you'll have to recalibrate. So basically, you'll have to change the methodology you're working on because data is not available, or the benchmarking partners may say they don't want to collaborate with you if you're trying to conduct a primary study. A second thing that will influence you when choosing the suitable methodology would be the benchmarking team experience. You've said earlier that you will go with the easiest methodology, but what I want to say is that if you have a team very inexperienced, it's their first project, the first time they are working on benchmarking, you don't go with the one that has 4 steps. Why you don't do that? Because the 4 steps are not very well underlined. They will know in part what to do for each step, as the name is self-explanatory, but they won't know all the steps. So what I would recommend you to do if you have an inexperienced team or a very small team, because that also influences it, to go with the most complex methodology, with the one that actually states all the steps you want to take. Maybe as the Xerox one, which is my recommendation to you if you have an inexperienced team, to have the stages and explain exactly what each stage means. Also, if you have a small benchmarking team as well, make sure you explain very well the steps, and you have to make sure also that each person is involved in the steps that need more time. For instance, data gathering or data analysis. Make sure you have more people dealing with the steps. But again, you need a methodology that that says everything very clear so that you know where you are. For a very experienced team, which has been deploying a lot of benchmarking studies so far, then it will be very easy to, when you say plan, they will definitely think of those 2-3 steps they have to take. So it will be easier to communicate. But again, if you have an inexperienced team, I would go with, let's say, the IBM or Xerox methodology versus APQC, which has 4 stages. And the third thing that influences the methodology, in my opinion, is the benchmarking type. We've been talking about best in class for some methodologies. So if you want to benchmark yourself on the best-in-class only, then you will go with the methodologies that have singled out the best-in-class as or selecting the best-in-class or selecting data only for those companies as a step. But if you're not interested in selecting data for best in class because you want to see the average industry level and you want to compare yourself with the average industry level, then you will have to go. I mean, you can go with those methodology, but just take out those steps, or you will go with methodologies that don't single out that step as mandatory for your benchmarking study. Before reviewing the webinar, I've seen that you answered. Oh, sorry. So I've seen there were some other answers, but I think we should let them for now, and I will respond to each and every one of you by email if there if I think that maybe I need to say something or to reply to what you said to my question. So the webinar review, basically benchmarking is a systematic process. So you have to take systematic steps, and to underline the steps you're taking, there are 4 main stages common to all or most benchmarking studies, and that all methodologies are based on. The third learning point is that what we've learned from practice and the answer to the question of the title of the webinar is that there is no single best methodology to be used. You can either go with one methodology that is already used by other companies and adapt it to your own needs, or based on the 4 main stages common to all studies, all benchmarking studies, you can create your own methodology, one that suits your environment, one that suits what you want to find out, and how you want to do it, and one that suits your needs based on the three things that influence. And these are the needs, the benchmarking partners and team experience, and the benchmarking type. Thank you very much for listening my webinar today, and I will get to you if I can reply to what you wrote.
Thank you very much, Alina, for your presentation. And now we'll begin with the Q&A session. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to address them now. All right, so we've received a first question. Alina, in your opinion, what training is required when starting with benchmarking from scratch?
Okay. There are basically two trainings that I would recommend. One of them would be to go to a benchmarking professional course that will teach you more about deploying a benchmarking study, and where you will get to practice parts of the benchmarking process in a learning environment. And the second one would be a data analysis course. If you are going to do it yourself, or if you have a team, make sure you have someone who does data analysis very well, because it will be mandatory in order to base your improvement ideas on the data and analyzed and on the results of the analysis. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. So if anyone has any other questions, we are still waiting for them. All right, so we've received another one. Alina, what is your advice to overcome benchmarking resistance?
Benchmarking resistance.
People's reluctance to accepting benchmarking.
Okay. Yes, I will consider that here we are talking about, let's say, the person who have the power to decide whether to start benchmarking or not in our organization. And I would go with presenting to them the benefits of a benchmarking study, and even try a case study. Xerox's case study is a very, very good one, and it shows how they managed to drive really good performance improvement and readjust their place in the market by using benchmarking. So I would go with this type of approach, with a case study and explaining how it actually happened in practice before us, in order to, for, let's say, the higher management to see that it happened before, and people were able to get good results out of benchmarking.
Thank you very much for your answer. We still have a couple of more minutes if anyone has any other query.
Meanwhile, I would just like to tell that one other answer to my second question was that um, we'll go with Xerox because of the method breakdown, which can be easily explained to the team and integrated and applicable. So basically, this was my recommendation as well, especially when you have a smaller team or an inexperienced team, or when you're working with a lot of people, to make sure you use a methodology which can be very well explained and understood by everyone, and to make sure everyone knows exactly the steps.
Well, given that there seem to be no more questions, that brings us to the end of our webinar. So, Alina, do you have any last words for our listeners?
Um, Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for your interesting insights. Thank you for let's say, talking to me during the webinar. And don't forget that next month we will have the last webinar of this series, focused on financial KPIs for the utility sector. Thank you very much.
Once more, thank you very much for your presentation. The KPI Institute appreciates your interest in the benchmarking methodologies Which One is the Best webinar. Follow our websites and our social media channels to find out more details and to subscribe to our next webinar, Introduction to Innovation Performance, which will be held on the 6th of September by Horia Botos. Also, if you are interested in getting a certification granted by the KPI Institute on vital areas within the performance management discipline, You can explore our scheduled courses on marketplace.kpiinstitute.org. Thank you again for your participation and have a nice day.